Hey, welcome back to another episode of Bitcoin Reformation Podcast. Ben, David, Jared, we're here and we're looking forward to this conversation today. But first, a quick catch up of what's going on in the lives of the Haupt, Townley, and Ruffner families. So, the Haupt family has purchased a new home, and boy, have I ever spent time thinking about how much my money is worth, my purchasing power, interest, and all the rest of it. And real practical use case here. Uh, some money that we had stashed away in a savings account that was making like 0.5% interest, that my wife and I finally decided, you know what, let's just bite the bullet. Let's put some of this in Bitcoin. We did that about a year ago, and I'm really, really, really glad now that we threw some money at Bitcoin. Even when, I mean, from the stuff that I bought at first, Bitcoin a year ago for me was very, very expensive. And I continue to hear people say, yeah, I should have gotten into Bitcoin a while back. And, you know, we've done all right. So part of our down payment will be coming from some Bitcoin proceeds. So that's what's up in the world of the Haupt family. So, David, how are things for you?
Yeah, things are well. Share with our listeners what I'd shared with you. It's a busy time in the household. I'm fresh back from some travels in the last day and a half. My in-laws are coming in. Here's my favorite in-law joke, dad joke. Do you know the difference between in-laws and outlaws? Outlaws are wanted. All right. So now that's a funny and fun joke on my part because my in-laws are absolutely spectacular. In fact,
There
but
you
they're
go. They're
inbound.
like
Why are they?
our. We only have a couple of listeners now on the podcast, and we need every in-law that we can get. Right?
I told that joke to a buddy once whose in-laws were there for like 2.5 weeks. It was at the end of his driveway, and he looked at me like, "How'd you know? How'd you know?" Um, no, they're inbound. They're inbound because our eighth grader, our fourth child, our daughter, one and only daughter, graduates from eighth grade tomorrow. Tomorrow is also the senior in high school's birthday. He turns 18. He graduates Friday, so that's about 3 days from now. And then in between, on the Thursday in between, we are throwing a graduation party. So it's busy times here, much to celebrate. That's what I've got. Yeah.
Before I share anything, Ben, I want to just touch on two things that you said. First, I love that you're willing to talk about selling your Bitcoin, right? So if you're new to the space, if you've been here a long time, there's this really maybe unhelpful thing that you say you never sell your Bitcoin, or that you always hold on to it and you never get rid of it. But I think doing those sort of things, having that permission to say, hey, it's okay to exchange this for big things like that, for services, for things that we need in life, right? That nothing is something that we need to hold on to until we die, sort of thing. I think that's super valuable as well. So in our life together, we just... It's going to be crazy. The listeners are going to think I only go on vacation, but I just got back from a vacation. So we use all of our vacation basically in April and May, and then I don't take vacation for the rest of the year. But we just got back from 5 days in Tennessee in the Smokies, and we've decided that we are officially mountain people, as if hiking the Appalachian Trail was not enough to prove that. This confirmed it for us, that there's just something so much more awe-inspiring, so much more just enjoyable about going out into the mountains and spending 5 hours hiking, going to see Klingman's Dome. I'll tell you this story. My daughter was very excited to go hiking. She's 3, right? And so we got to Klingman's Dome. We set her down on the nice asphalt path, and she took about 30 steps and then turned to me and said, "Pick me up." And so I was like, "Girl, come on, like we got like half a mile to go, like this." So I carried her sort of on my chest here up all the way to Klingman's Dome, and for a while I was also carrying our son Silas in a backpack as well. So it's like, this is a workout that I did not expect to get, but isn't this what parenting is all about, right? I'm doing this for you, kid, and you don't even know what work I'm doing, how much I love you, and what big of act of service this is. So it was beautiful. It was a lot of fun. Always good to get away and to be refreshed in that way. There's just awe-inspiring nature of being high up, of being away from things where you can't hear cars, you can't hear society. It's just talk about soul rest. It forces you to stop and hear those thoughts in your head, and maybe take some time, hopefully, to be with Jesus, be with the one who made it all too. So that's what we've been up to. So this week on the Bitcoin Reformation Podcast, we're going to basically do a 2.0 of last week. So last week, David led us so well into talking about some of the technical stuff about how does Bitcoin work? What are the actual parts of it? We talked a whole bunch about the first 3-4 episodes about why Bitcoin and why does it matter. And we just began last week to touch the iceberg of how does it work. And so we talked a little bit about the history of Bitcoin, when it was made, when the code was written, the why behind it around the banks, getting another stimulus, a bailout from the government. We talked about that number of 21 million, on how many there are and how many there ever will be, how many are issued, and how that demand, that supply is continuing to, the demand is continuing to go up, but the supply is continuing to go down. And then we also talked a little bit about mining as well, and sort of how it works and why it's important that it is this way. So we're going to try and continue to take some more logical steps. But before we do, I want to throw it back to you guys and ask sort of 3 questions all in one. So first, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much would you say you feel that you know Bitcoin? So like if you said, hey, I'm a 10, I think I know every single thing there is to know about Bitcoin, or 1, I know absolutely nothing. So 1 to 10. And then how long do you feel it took you to grasp what Bitcoin was? So if I'm a 8, it took me 2 years to get there, something like that. And then in that process, what was the most valuable thing, or how did you learn the best throughout that process? So I'll turn it to you first, Ben, and then David, back to you.
Wow, those are great questions. I feel like I'm, being interviewed or something. I would say that I probably thought that I was higher, and the more I get into Bitcoin, my numbers actually going down, not up, because I'm realizing more and more how much I don't know about Bitcoin, and what a radically transformative technology Bitcoin really is. So I would probably put myself at a 5 or 6, and I've been in Bitcoin, messing around with Bitcoin for going on 8 years. So I have tons more to learn. I just read an amazing article about Bitcoin and governance, and how radical Bitcoin is from a governance perspective. So I just continue to learn more and more stuff about Bitcoin. I think the 3 of us each bring distinctives to Bitcoin, and there's all these different rabbit trails to run down and learn about. So it was rate myself. It was how long has it taken me to get there, and what was the third one?
What's been the most valuable thing to you as you've learned?
Oh yeah, most valuable thing I think has been a couple of books that I love Audible and audio books. So I've read or listened to a number of books. Probably the most transformative book that really helped me to understand why I care about Bitcoin is The Block Size Wars. That book was probably the most helpful for me in kind of deep dive understanding what happened in Bitcoin's history and the outlook for the future. I've listened to lots of others, read lots of others, There's some great Christian books about Bitcoin. Thank God for Bitcoin, and Biblical Case for Bitcoin, I think is what it's called. The book by Jan Pritzker that you guys put me onto, I forget what that's called, but I'll let David talk about that. So yeah, books I think are probably my go-to, and maybe second would be just listening to podcasts and people talking about Bitcoin on platforms, mostly social media. The platform is X, although X has some interesting new features that may lead some folks away from X. So yeah, that's how I would answer those three. David, we'll throw it to you.
Well, the Jan Pritzker book, I just looked it up, is Inventing Bitcoin. It's like an 80-page little book. I bumped into this book after I'd been in Bitcoin for 4+ years. I've been in 5. And I just thought, oh, this is such a great primer for me in terms of organizing so much that I've learned. And now I've bought several copies and lent them out / given them away / lost them to the lending out process, but have gladly done so. All right, you're going to give me your questions again. I'm so exhausted. The first one was...
You're good. 1 through 10. 1 through 10,
yeah.
How much do you know? And how long do you think it took you to get there?
I'm with Ben. In fact, my answer would have been Ben's, other than I heard Ben's answer, and I've got to think about it. He said, I thought I was higher. Maybe now it's less. I don't think Ben knows less about Bitcoin today than he did last year. So I don't think he's saying that. And my answer might have sounded similar. It's more like this for me. If it's like 5 out of 10, and then I hit 6, I find out that like my knowledge base is now 6, but the goal line is 12 or 15, right? Like there's just, so, each thing I learn opens to me 2 or 3 more things that I don't know. So there is sort of this constant progression, deepening of it, or as many Bitcoiners love to talk about, going down the rabbit hole, maybe further. And I think that's true of Ben. I don't want to speak for you, Ben, but I think something like that's probably true of you and you as well, Jared, as we've talked about this. So yeah, where would I'm over 50% of the way there to know everything about Bitcoin, but then I find out there's just more. It's sort of like that YouTube channel, Smarter Every Day. I don't know that I'm smarter every day, but I'm enjoying continuing my education in Bitcoin. And that's part of the fun of it, I think, is it just keeps kind of pulling you forward, both learning what has been designed, maybe what has taken place, and then implications of it. Just the tendrils sort of spread out quite far. That goes to my answer for the second question, if I can remember the second question, which was...
How long did it take for you to get there?
How long? Yeah, it took me a while. Yeah, it's taken to this point. I mean, I initially started investing in coins. The first coin I was excited about was a privacy coin. Don't even need to talk about that now. And then I got on the hype cycle for like XRP, Stellar Lumens, just a few other ones. And I did a bit of like sort of day trading in and out and ended up losing money because it turns out when you day trade, you incur tax consequences all over the place. Bad idea. I had a toe in the door with Bitcoin at the time, but I had this unit bias against Bitcoin. Let's just pick a dollar. So for $50, I can get a smidgen of a fraction of Bitcoin, or for $50, I can get 1,100 of these coins over here. So there was this kind of unit bias, is what we often talk about. Funny thing is, I don't do that with a loaf of bread versus rice. I'm not like, well, skip the bread, because if I order, a side dish of rice, I get a lot more rices. You don't do that at a restaurant, so to speak. But for whatever reason, in the investing world, this is a known issue. I bumped into that. And then it was just, again, slowly over time, bumping into things, I was wrestling at the time with our stimulus checks. Like, I'm like, I get the stimulus check and I want to put it on my bed and swim through it like Scrooge McDuck. I want to do that. And yet I'm sitting here learning a couple things. I'm like, I'm getting what was it? 2,000, 2,500. I don't know if it was per individual and family, a few $1,000s. And yet, if you divide the overall stimulus package by American households, like my household should be getting $80,000. I'm wrestling with U.S. Monetary and fiscal policy at the time. I'm bumping into my day trading. I'm bumping into coins where they're just shady. And so I'm having to ask myself, is there anything in any of these at all? And over the course of time, I just slowly found out Bitcoin it's not only the first of its kind, but it's really a different species than so many of the other projects. So you'll have to determine that here on your own, whether you can make sense of that claim or digging further, whether you believe the same. So it took time. It took all 5 years, Jared. But what I've loved about it is how connected it is with so many other things. Like I never stopped to consider why the Bible talks so much about the scales and measures and rulers not cheating with money. And now I'm coming to understand the fooling around with money, monetary and fiscal policy, which is absolutely happening across the globe. It affects a lot of things. It affects even my children's generation and what they believe their prospects are in adult life. Even when my children are not connecting that themselves with money, it is absolutely connected. I think it's connected with the lack of some amount of babies in our chairs and pews at churches and in our neighborhoods, the library, school systems. Ask a young couple, when are you having kids? How many are you having? Why aren't you having kids? It'll go back to money. So for all those reasons. And did I then cover number 3? Give me number 3 one more time.
What's been the most valuable thing for you as you learn?
I think that was it. That I was trying to get there. I was remembering the hint of your question, just how connected this is with so many things. It's connected with home prices. It's connected with politics. And I'm not just talking left and right. I'm talking about the politicization of even our Supreme Court. I honestly, that's another conversation for another time, but I think it's absolutely connected that almost every organization becomes a political organization because it's a scrapping for power, because he or she or they who are in power then control the funny money. And if the money isn't so funny, then what people aspire to do should they gain office fundamentally has to shift, has to change, and I would say to the better. So that's just, I just love the interconnectedness of it all.
Absolutely. It's one of the most, I think, unique things about it, that to start with one thing, call it an iceberg, call it a rabbit hole. There are so many different things that you would never have thought you were going to learn about as you learn more about this. So I'm going to be a bad interview and answer the question myself.
Yes.
I think I'm somewhere. I like to think that I'm a 6, maybe a 7 on my best day. But I also feel very deeply with David and Ben too, that it is truly one of the things, the more you know, the less you know, because you realize how many other parts there are to it and how deep the different things, the different languages, the different words and phrases of Bitcoin is and are, because it really is, in some ways, it's like a very unique subculture, right? That we use words, we talk about things that if you were outside of this community, if you're just coming into it, it sounds incredibly strange and foreign to you. So we're going to talk hopefully a little bit about that. We have a little term sheet that we'll put in the video description later on for you to maybe go and see some. But as far as how long it took, so I didn't get into this until March, I think, of 2021. And so I've only been here for 3 years now. And so I'm still new, but I would say it probably took me at least a year to a year and a half before I felt comfortable enough to sort of talk about it in a sense of, well, it's more than just a thing that is worth money and is going up. Like I could talk more about what 21 million was, what a miner is, what a node is that we're going to talk a little bit about today, stuff like that. But what's been most valuable for me, at least, has been the podcast too. So listening to people talk about it, listening to these people who are incredibly more intelligent than I am, who have spent years and hours and hours and hours learning about this, hear their expertise, and then try and, take away one or two things has been valuable. But I hope, listener, that as you hear this, I'm going to guess that you maybe thought we knew a lot, and maybe we do compared to what and where you are today. But I also want you to hear humility here, that this is not we are some sort of crazy high in the sky chair experts and you need to listen to us. But this is hey, we're on this journey together. We want you to come with us and we want to invite you to learn more. And so that if this is still super confusing, we're going to talk about some more technical stuff today, that's okay. That it's part of the learning process, it's part of becoming a part of a different community and part of learning about a new thing. And so my encouragement to you is to stick with it, to continue to ask more questions, continue to learn more as we go along. So that's why we spent all that time answering those things. So today, what does it mean to own Bitcoin? That's the question I want you to think about. What does it mean to own Bitcoin? Because I can say that I own a car, or at least I own part of it. If I have a loan, I somewhat own it, right? The title's in my name, but there's a lien holder on that car. But if I want to know that I own my car, how do I do it? Well, I'll go outside in the yard and say, well, my car it's in the yard. I can see it. If I really want to prove my ownership, then I'll get my title, right? And I'll say, hey, look, this official document says that I own it. It's another sort of physical proof. There's two things that I can say, hey, this is it. I own this thing. That's an easy one. But what about something like stock, right? So if in my retirement account, I own various stocks, various ETFs, how do I prove that I own that? To be honest, I have no idea. Other than the fact that on my computer screen with my username and password, it pulls up a certain amount of numbers that then equal a certain amount of a different number that somehow if I click a few buttons, I can get cash deposited into my bank account, right? I don't know how that works. I'm assuming that there's some sort of proof of ownership somewhere, but let's take it another step further too. How do you know that you own the dollars that you have in your bank account? Every 2 weeks, I get a paycheck. It goes into my bank account. I get a nice notification. Congratulations, you've been paid today, right? But how do I know that those dollars are there? I mean, I can send them around. I can pay for stuff, and it happens. It works. But how do I prove that I own that sort of thing? And more importantly, what happens if that bank goes away, right? What happens if that thing that I've been interacting with, a company, it doesn't matter if it's Chase or PNC, whatever, what happens if they disappear? Does it mean my money is gone? All those sort of things. This is what makes Bitcoin super unique, and perhaps unlike anything else in the world, I would even posit to you. Because to own Bitcoin, you can truly own it. And what I mean by that is you can truly know that this is yours, that it's not someone else's, and that the entire world can see, well, more or less, they can verify that that is yours and that it's not Ben's, it's not David's, it's not a company's, but that it is your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
First, go ahead.
I was going to say some of the language for that, maybe slightly technical, I don't know, but some of the language for it is that it is a bearer asset, that you're getting the actual thing, or you have the ability. That's actually more true to have the real thing. And I think in this case, and then I'll throw it right back to you, Jared, but our hearers can just think of gold, right? People, you'll hear all the commercials all the time, more than Bitcoin, about investing in gold. Well, what does that mean? If I were to call up that firm or pull them up online and I'll go back to my $50, put $50 into gold, what would I get for that? Is the actual gold arriving to my doorstep in my hand? That would be a bearer asset. I bought the thing and I have physical or very personal, maybe is the better way to put it, possession of the thing. Or do I get a coupon for the thing, right? Which would be like a sheet of paper to say David Ruffner owns this $50 worth of gold, or at least $50 as priced on such and such a day when he bought it. Which one is it? And a lot of the gold that's sold is this quote unquote paper gold. And in a sense, when you describe any of the three of us or our hearers, in a very real sense, in fact, and it comes to our bank, pick your bank. Most people, I see branches empty anymore, just absolutely empty. It used to be more or less empty, but grandma and grandpa are going, they just seem absolutely empty now. It's just amazing because we're doing our banking online. We're seeing numbers and everything, but really it's as if we're seeing representations of these things or coupons for these things. My app and the numbers there are not the same as having cold hard cash in my hand. They just are not the same, right? And anymore, there's a bias against having actual bearer assets, dollars in your hands. And then, finally, we could chase that down further still and say, even the dollars in American life used to be redeemable for the real thing, which was gold. Now there's nothing backing it except for the full faith and credit. So we've got kind of these cascading pieces. Do I have the real thing or do I have a representation for the real thing? We've gotten very, very comfortable with living in sort of a representation world, or as some people call it, a coupon world, where even that app and the number I'm seeing here is a coupon for the real thing. And by the way, most banks, if I have over $2,000 or something like this down in the bank, I can't even just go down there anymore and get the thing out. I have to call them ahead of time and tell them beyond a certain dollar amount that I intend to withdraw it. And then they might not even say, hey, that's great, we'll be ready for you. They might say, why do you want to do that? So there's all kinds of things going on here. But back to it, what I heard you describe, Jared, is this idea of a bearer asset. And in this case, here's the strange extra piece, a digital bearer asset, where you have the ability with Bitcoin. We still have to ask, well, what does that mean? But you have the ability to actually have possession of the thing. Let that sink in, even though I'm sure numerous other questions follow right behind. Back to you, Jared.
Well, I think, David, what you're trying to get at is what I'm trying to prove, that to some ways, if you're new to this space, we talk about this digital money or digital gold. We've used that word in the past, and that's kind of scary to a lot of people, right? So you're just going to tell me I'm going to have this thing that exists on the internet that's somehow worth something? Like, I'm sorry, I'd rather buy a house, right? And that I can see, that I can know is there. But like we've said, I mean, we're used to this in some ways. I think sort of if you go from generation to generation, from sort of the boomers on down, that it becomes a little bit more and more comfortable with it. But the world we live in today is already sort of a digital existence, if you will, a digital value-based thing, right? That there's not a lot of things in life that are physically held in our hands on a regular basis of value, right? I mean, there's maybe you hold gold, maybe you have a really fancy diamond ring that you wear, stuff like that. But short of some really big ticket items, stuff like the dollars in our bank account, our retirement accounts, the gold that you might have, all these sort of things digitally live online. So as you think about this, as you hear this, my first sort of push is to say it might not be as scary as you already, or as you feel, because it's already how we're living.
That's good, Ben, or Jared, rather. That's really good.
I agree with that. And I think the other thing that Jared and David, that you're both getting at, is if you don't have Bitcoin as a bearer asset, or some asset that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you own it. And so, Jared, as I was listening to you, I could foresee a listener or viewer saying, I don't know, Jared. Are you getting too technical? I mean, I don't know how my bank works, but it's kind of good enough. And in some ways, I sympathize with that. Like, simple person, I don't have time to learn about everything in the world, and yet I've been burned a couple of times in my life by people that trusted systems. One was a church where I was a member, and people trusted that the money people were doing the right things. And it takes a lot of trust if you don't know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you own something. What you're essentially doing is you're trusting somebody else. I trust Commerce Bank, and if Commerce Bank doesn't get you back what you put in, then your trust begins to erode. In the church, people especially trust the money people and brothers and sisters in Christ, and yet the scriptures are crystal clear that there is not a single person that has not suffered the effects of the fall and can't be tempted. And so, what happens when you begin to put your trust in somebody and then they let you down? And you had been hoping, you'd been saving up for something like buying a house, and all of a sudden, this trust that you had, if it gets dashed, that's a really big deal. I would be really, really upset if I wanted to buy a house and then I found out that uh, whatever bank that I was holding my money at didn't have it anymore. Um, or if you don't trust your government to maintain the value of the dollars that you're saving in your bank account. So Bitcoiners talk a lot about trust. And I think that this whole idea of knowing that you own something, if you don't know how it's owned, you're probably trusting some other entity. And there's a lot of potential harm in that.
And I think the word we sometimes use in the Bitcoin world is trustless, but it's I think the more accurate way is it's trust minimalized, right? That ultimately there's no such thing as a trustless world, but that what we're trying to do and what we do in the way Bitcoin works is minimize the amount of trust we need to have in someone else to either do the right thing, to not be selfish, to not have that sort of inward look, right, curved in on yourself way that you operate in the world. So when it comes to owning Bitcoin, when it comes to buying it, we're going to want to pursue this sort of thing, right? We want to pursue what does it look like to own it ourselves, to verify that we have what we have, and to minimize our trust in other people. Yeah. So in our banks, right, we all know about FDIC insurance, right? If you have 200,000 or whatever it is nowadays, amount of dollars in your bank account, if your bank closes, the FDIC will come in and they'll save you and they'll bail you out. And that's great. That's nice. But what it's doing at the end of the day is it's creating an environment where now banks can kind of do as they please, knowing that is up to a certain point, the government's going to come in and bail them out, right? And so this is another sort of reason why Bitcoin is in existence, to stand and to be a true, like David said, a bear asset. So we're not going to necessarily endorse anyone. We're not sponsored. We don't get any money from these sort of things. But if I was going to send people to maybe 2 or 3 different places to say, hey, if this is your first time buying Bitcoin, this is where I would go. I would refer people to Coinbase. We're talking about the most trusted sort of places in the world. So Coinbase is one of the most original, long time standing places here in the space. Swan Bitcoin is another great place that we would probably send you to if you wanted to. They have a lot of good onboarding stuff to answer questions and help you do these sort of things. And then I would say River as well is another good one that will also help you. Those last two are really solely focused on Bitcoin and helping people save in Bitcoin and buy some of their Bitcoin too. So let's talk about
those last.
Go ahead.
By the way, I do want to talk about that. I started at Coinbase, so you've described my journey almost exactly. I've started there. My issue with like Coinbase, they are clearly respected. That is true. Huge investments, but they're willing to sell you a lot of odd coins where I think they're really spurious. It's sort of like being smashing together, to my mind, to use a different image, like a health food store and a Dollar General, right? It's great that you're selling all this healthy stuff, but you're still kind of selling the junk on the side. Versus if I'm looking for health, I might go to the health food store, or I don't know if that's a great analogy, but it's the one I'm going to use right now. So anyways, I just mentioned that. So I would echo all three of those work, but I really liked how you leaned in on the last two, particularly Swan and River, as Bitcoin only.
I agree. I very similar story. Started with Coinbase. One of the things that has led me away from Coinbase, frankly, is the fees. So if you want to dabble in some Bitcoin and you just want to buy a little bit and then hold it and watch it, and it's just kind of a one-time thing, you're going to throw $100 at it, and you do have to link your bank account to these things, but I would say don't be scared of that. That is a very normal thing. Even banks link to other banks digitally, and so don't be afraid of that. It's very, very secure, and they're using good processes to process this stuff. But if you look at how much you're going to have to pay on a transaction fee with Coinbase to buy a little bit of Bitcoin, you're going to pay a couple of percentage points. On River, and I think this might be true of Swan. I'm not sure. I've not used Swan, but with River, if you decide I want a dollar cost average, put a little bit each week or each month, and it's the same amount each time, they will, after your first transaction, there are no fees. So it's actually cheaper to dollar cost average to buy just a little bit at a regular occurrence with River. You won't end up paying fees. And again, we're not sponsored by River or anybody else. We're just talking our personal experiences here.
And so now let's see or make the comparison, right? At this stage, if you are buying Bitcoin from any of these places, right now, where is your trust placed? Your trust is placed in that organization, that company, right? That they've actually done what you push the button on the screen to do. So at this point, just like you would a stock, if I wanted to buy Amazon, Apple, Tesla, whatever, if I click that buy button, I'm assuming that the company that I have somehow wired my digital money to has done what I wanted them to. But this is where Bitcoin is unique. So we're going to use a new word here, a wallet. And so a wallet, a Bitcoin wallet, again, there's a few ones here. So we'll name the one that does other coins first, and then the two that are more Bitcoin specific. So Ledger is a really popular wallet company. So is Trezor, Trezor, Trezor. But they do a lot of other coins too. And so the two that I think we would say we recommend would be a Coldcard and then a Blockstream Jade wallet as well. And so what these are, I should have brought mine, but they look like a bunch of different things. So basically they look like small little either computers, small little square plastic things, and you either plug them into your computer, they need to communicate with the internet in some way, shape, and form. And what do these wallets do? But they control the power of the ability to send, to receive, and then ultimately, obviously, to spend the Bitcoin that you have. Okay, so let's slow down a little bit. If I reach into my back pocket, I have my wallet. I'm a good millennial, so it's really thin because I don't carry any cash. So you can rob me if you want. I'll just cancel my credit cards. But in this wallet, usually if you carry cash, is the dollar itself, right? So if I have my dollar, a $20 bill in here, if I want to spend it, I will literally take it out and spend it. But if I don't have this wallet, then I can't spend it. I just can't use it. Bitcoin wallets are a little bit different. So Bitcoin wallets, if this is my Bitcoin wallet, my Bitcoin doesn't somehow live on this wallet digitally, and if I lose this wallet, that then my Bitcoin is gone forever. It doesn't work that way. It's not a wallet in the sense of you deposit it into it and then you deposit it out of it. Instead, Bitcoin wallets hold what are called, again, a new term here, private and public keys. So let's use an analogy. What do I mean when I say public-private keys? So a good one that we use a lot in the space is the analogy of your house. So your house where you live has a public address, right? You used to be able to buy these from the post office. Churches would buy the new list of people who would move in to go and say, hey, come to our church, right? And this is public information. I'm pretty sure my address is on the LCMS pastor finder, which is rather frightening to think about. But nonetheless, it's publicly available. And I can do what I want to try and make it less publicly available. But it's there, right? Everyone knows my address. But not everyone has the private key to my house, right? So here's my private key to my house that myself, my wife, and I think one of our family members in the area has a key to our house. And short of breaking in through a window, that's where this analogy kind of breaks down, but short of breaking in to the window, you can't access what is in my house unless you have my private key. And so let's make the jump. Go, David, you want to interject? Go ahead.
I want to envision this because I think it helps the whole thing along, that you're one of these houses that in the front door there's a mail slot as well. Not just a mailbox outside, but a mail slot. Because if I know where your house is, with or without your permission, I can give you something. I can give you more Bitcoin through the mail slot. But once it goes through that slot back to you, and then I'll hand it right back to you without your private key, I no longer have access to it. And my choices are, at that point, your choices are to continue holding it or to spend it. Those are really your choices with the Bitcoin that you have now secured behind your private key.
And I'll
go ahead, Ben.
I'll just ask a quick question and ask you to clarify this. So we talked a little bit about what we call exchanges, Coinbase, Swan, River. Those are exchanges. And then you mentioned these wallets, Ledger, Trezor, Coldcard, Blockstream. So explain a little bit for people that don't own Bitcoin yet, but are curious, are interested. Do you have to have both, or does one come before the other? How does a wallet work? Like, do you have a wallet at Coinbase? And how is that similar or different from Coldcard?
It's a great question. So if we're using the analogy of buying a stock, once I buy a stock at, whatever company you want to use, it's going to be in my account. That would be sort of the analogy I would use to a wallet on an exchange. And so even on Coinbase, on Swan, on River, I have a wallet with them that has an address, kind of like an account number, that if I wanted to send Bitcoin from Swan to Coinbase or from Coinbase to Swan, I could do that. So I have an address with that exchange. But what's different is that I'm still trusting them to do that. And so what if I were to, so I'll answer the first question. You can have a wallet at Coinbase without having a wallet in your at home, without having this what we call hardware wallet, right? So you can have just a digital wallet. You can just have your account at Coinbase and you're fine. Your Bitcoin is still there. But to do this true ownership thing, I need to do what's called withdrawing. So just like I would go to my bank and withdraw my cash out, right? Take it into my hands, into my custody. I need to withdraw my Bitcoin from an exchange into my wallet that I control. And so let's go back to the analogy. My wallet that I control has a public address. You can have multiple public addresses. And anyone, I could send Bitcoin to Ben if I wanted to. I could send Bitcoin to David if I wanted to, if he shared his address with me. Anyone can deposit Bitcoin into that address. But once it is in there, there's no way to get it out unless you have the private key, right? Unless you have the power and authority to do this. Another way to think about it is unless I have the code for the nuclear bomb, no one else can press it, right? And so once that is in, it is in, and it's not coming out unless I tell it to go somewhere. And so there's the public addresses, they're a collection of numbers that are designated sort of where this Bitcoin is going to go, are different from your private keys, which control your ability to actually move things here. And so it doesn't live, what lives on the wallet is the numbers and the keys, not the Bitcoin. Because where the Bitcoin is on, we're going to jump into the next section. The Bitcoin is, you're advocating, you're changing who owns the Bitcoin. So on the public blockchain, the history of every copy of who owns what and where every 21 million coins are, what you're doing is just controlling and shuffling around a certain amount of coins. So in a hypothetical world, let's say, for ease of use here, let's say that I had one Bitcoin that I wanted to send to Ben. He would be very grateful for that. I would send it to him, and then my ownership, if I could pass this through the camera, would go to Ben. But I still have my wallet. My keys are still the same. But now that coin that I have is now in Ben's wallet, in his hands to control. But let's say that Ben wants to send it to David now. Ben, using his own private keys, can send that one Bitcoin to David. David's also going to be very grateful for that. But then you could look, because this is all publicly available, anyone can look at this sort of thing. You could look and you could see the 3 different public addresses that Bitcoin moved from. So you could see it. We wouldn't be able to know that it's David's or mine unless we told someone that, but we would be able to see the address, the numbers and letters of where that Bitcoin has moved. And so what makes this so unique is that I can take this, let's use our flowchart. I can buy on an exchange dollars for Bitcoin. It's in my exchange wallet. It's there, but I'm still trusting Coinbase or Swan or River. But then I can withdraw it off of that exchange onto my wallet. And when it's on my wallet, it's entirely in my hands. It's a bare asset. It's truly a bare asset, like David said. And then I'm free to not do anything with it. I'm free to let it sit there for 30 years, for 10 years, for 5 months if I want to. Or I'm free to send it back to Coinbase, maybe, if I want to sell it and exchange it for dollars to make a down payment on a house, something like that. But it's very unique in the sense that it sits in your possession, that it might be scary, right? But there's no customer support to call, right? That it is truly yours, and you are both responsible for it, and it is in your possession. So I'm going to throw it back to you guys. I've sort of talked a lot here. Any gaping holes, any questions that are rising to the surface as we sort of try and lead down self-custody, stuff like that?
Well, yeah, a couple things. It might sound to somebody like you're saying, oh, wow, invest in Bitcoin, it'll be great for you. But now there's no FDIC behind you, right? You just told us, like, we have responsibility. That's a lot of responsibility. It is. We're not used to taking that sort of measure of responsibility. We also have lived in a narrow window of time where we're also largely, God bless it for so many of us, we're used to the institutions that are meant to protect us, largely protecting us and not turning on us. And that's where maybe some of the use cases of Bitcoin, why it would entice people, are different for some people. Our government hasn't turned on our bank accounts, but guess what? It's happened over time in many places. It has happened a little bit in American life, where the government confiscated all known gold back in the 30s. That has happened, but guess what? That's beyond my memory. I'm getting older, but I'm not that old. And even well, goodness, you'd have to be like 95 to kind of remember that, maybe. And even then, in the remembering of it, it would have been because your parents, when you were young and getting a little bit older, told you about it. So we're not used to that, but it has begun to happen. If you'll remember, just a few years ago, some activists in Canada had their bank accounts frozen and money's withdrawn from it. That's happened. The banking systems are not good in other parts of the world where they've not acted faithfully. So there are use cases in some places, maybe growing use cases, where it would suggest that people like us, strange as it seems to us in our living history, in our living memory, to say, hey, taking sort of extreme ownership, not just of yourself, but of your value that you're trying to save in life, might be an important thing to consider. So that's one thing that comes to mind. I would say the other thing is this is very much related, though, to the overall supply, right? The overall supply is 21 million. Two things wouldn't do well for Bitcoin is if somebody could change that supply number, right? And the other thing that wouldn't do well for this network is if somebody says, if you had to constantly say to somebody else, "Hey, you still holding all my Bitcoin for me?" and they're kind of behind closed doors and they're like, "Oh yeah, we got it all. We got it all. Just trust us." This goes back to your trust minimized piece. So when you combine a supply cap of 21 million, a known supply issuance over time that's diminishing, when you combine that with this kind of, I'll call it extreme ownership, this now is where the power is coming in, right? And it's wonderful. We can largely trust. How should I say that? The exchanges where you buy stuff from, their business model demands that you trust them. It demands that, right? If they're going to be in existence not only today, but tomorrow and next year and 10 years from now, they can't break that trust. However, we've seen that trust broken on some of them. FTX was one. And guess which exchange is not around anymore? FTX. So we could both sort of like trust our neighbor and say, yeah, if they're going to remain in business and have a livelihood, they can't do us wrong. And yet there have been exchanges that have done wrong. I think that's even at a small scale. Ben described that at a church level, and it's happened regrettably, sadly, but maybe not surprisingly. So back to it, maybe you take extreme ownership of some of this stuff.
I think that's really helpful. As I was thinking about all this, I mean, I suppose that somebody could be listening to us and say, "Gosh, guys, you just sound kind of paranoid. You sound like maybe you're you're going to hole up and create an anti-government conspiracy and put your tinfoil hats on, and you're just guarding against everything." And I suppose that's possible, and that Bitcoiners could be accused of that. But here's how I would describe it, rather in a very different way, using terms that the Christian church and theologians have used, and that's this idea of stewardship. So, what is stewardship? It's when somebody puts their assets into the hands of another, right? A man went away for a long time and left his vineyard to for other people to care for. That's inviting these people to steward his vineyard. Jesus talked a lot about this, and good stewards are praised highly by Jesus. It's really, really important. Jesus even says at one point, you should have at least put my gift, my talents, at the bank and earn some interest on them, for crying out loud. So I think about it from a stewardship perspective. The reason that I'm in Bitcoin is because I didn't think that keeping all of my purchasing power in the US dollar was good financial stewardship for me and for my family. And then as I began to buy some Bitcoin and I saw some of these exchanges go down, I got into Bitcoin shortly after Mt. Gox, this Japanese exchange that got hacked, and they said that they had all these coins, and all of a sudden they got hacked, and they couldn't give people the coins that they said that they had in their accounts. And so there developed this whole saying in the Bitcoin community, not your keys, not your coins. And so out of an abundance of caution, but to flip this again to say, no, to be a good steward of the resources that God has given me, I think it's probably a good idea to get my coins off of this exchange and work on learning self-custody. And that's Coldcard, Ledger, Trezor. That's what's called self-custody. So it's about stewarding the resources that have been given to me and my family, and doing my level best uh, as a way to protect my family, as a way to care for the resources that we have, to take care of that house that we live in, the financial house that we live in. It's for me been about being a good steward.
David, you're laughing.
Yeah, I just looked up something. I mean, it is funny as we're sitting here talking about it in our little echo chamber, but we literally, like, this rabbit hole that I've gone down. I am so glad I have. I literally think it's one of the most exciting things in terms of temporal earthly care for my family and my children that I've ever been a part of. It's not the same as God's promise of salvation, which is anchored in the death and resurrection of Jesus. That, my friends, is where true joy and peace is, for both now and the life to come. But in this life, back to your word, stewarding, Ben, I'm called to care for people. So, like, I'm high conviction, incredibly thankful and excited to have stumbled into this, looked into this, participated with this in such a way that I think it will be a part of the fabric of care of my family going forward. How can I not then want that for my friends and family and neighbors? Or I should say maybe family, friends, and neighbors. I do. And that's why we're having this conversation. And we'd love to, have an audience, but we'd love to, if it helps progress somebody else in thinking of these things, just amazing. But as we're doing all this today, it does sound like a lot. And it also sounds like, it occurs to me, like, why would I give up that to do this? To where if I stumble and fall, it's on me and I could lose everything. My money's always been good in the bank. And we brought it up a couple times. FDIC insured. Why am I smirking? I looked it up. I can't find right here the top dollar, the number of dollars that the FDIC insures. It's in the trillions. I forget what it is. But I can tell you this, is that they only have 1.35% of all the dollars they insure. They only have 1.35% of those dollars on hand. We've had 2 bank collapses and not so long ago. We just heard yesterday that 63 banks, and I have not seen the name of the list, in American life are at risk of insolvency for a variety of reasons. But one of the big ones is they own a whole lot of mortgages for commercial real estate, and it's just tanking in our big cities, right? And so 63 banks are at risk of becoming insolvent. But don't worry, dear friend, FDIC will come and rescue you. Well, I tell you, it'll only take a couple bank failures and the bailouts. They will draw down on that 1.35%. And what happens next is the federal government says, we're the ultimate backstop. And the problem is they will also backstop the FDIC insurance, not with dollars in existence, but through quantitative easing. They will create new dollars. So suddenly the dollars in your bank account, which you've been trusted in somebody else, and the banker says they're still there. I'll go back to my $50. David and Megan Ruffner, congratulations. You had $50 in the bank account. It's FDIC insured. It's still there. But the it becomes immediately a smaller fraction of the flood of new dollars coming in to insure the little David and Megan Ruffners of the world, or the rest of us. This isn't just a hypothetical. This stuff is here. So I feel the responsibility, beginning to understand these things, to dig further and say, is that a real issue? And take further steps, not only to protect my family, but it's not just protection. It's been a joy to take these steps, to kind of take some responsibility back. When I've been farming it out, kind of mindlessly, I've been farming it out because it's worked for what? 5-6 decades? That's not a long time, right? I've been farming out my trust to others. This one does take extreme sort of self-ownership. It does take the work you put into it. But I found in life, and then I'll shut up, that the best things in my life have taken a lot of work. Marriage, parenting, back to what you started us with, Jared, taking your kids to the top of Klingman's Dome, 6,600 feet there in Western North Carolina, or right at the North Carolina-Tennessee border, in fact. It's amazing hard work. Some of the best things in life take good work. And this has been one of those journeys for me. It's been a hard journey. It's work, but I like where it's brought me and those I love.
So I have one more thing. I know we're at an hour already, but I want to close sort of this loop. So we've talked about exchanges, talked about where we're going to buy Bitcoin. We've talked about how we're going to take ownership, take custody of it ourselves. But we need to answer the question, if the wallets don't contain the Bitcoin, where are they, sort of thing, a little bit. And I've talked about, use the word node before, and we've referenced it a few times too, but I think it's important for us to at least finish here before we go any further. So to help us understand this, I want to show you something and use this as an example. This is a Bible. The most popular book ever published, right? Millions around the world. In some ways, a Bitcoin node is similar to what this is. Because what is this but a copy of a different Bible, right? That a group of scholars and translators translated from Greek and Hebrew and small amounts of Aramaic into English, and then they sent that copy off to a publishing company who then probably sent it off somewhere else to print it, and they made thousands, and there's been millions of copies of Bitcoin or of the Bible made. And so if I were to lose this Bible, is the word of God gone? Right? No. There are lots of other Bibles in the world, right? I can go and buy another copy of another Bible. And there's some fun, I don't know if it's actually a museum somewhere, but there's some fun things about Bibles that have been printed incorrectly with some fun errors and things like that in them. But nevertheless, this is a copy of the Bible, right? And so when we use the phrase Bitcoin node, what we're talking about is a copy of the entire blockchain, the entire history. So whenever someone sends Bitcoin, whenever someone sends it, if I send it to Ben or Ben sends it to David, whenever there's a transaction in that way, we talked about that last week, that information is encoded onto every single Bitcoin node around the world, right? And so these are hard drives that are connected to the internet that run the Bitcoin software, that then every time something happens, it's etched down for history, for all of time on that hard drive. And so I can see, theoretically, if I wanted to, I could go back and look at the first 100 transactions of Bitcoin. I could go, if I wanted to see them, I could go on to explore and do that. But why this is valuable is a few reasons, because we're still trying to minimize our trust, right? So if I buy so this is what I have at my house. I have a hard drive, an SSD, connected to a Raspberry Pi computer, and I run a piece of software called Umbrel that then downloads the entire Bitcoin blockchain onto my hard drive. And then I can connect my wallet. I know this is a little technical, but bear with me. I could connect my wallet to that node to then say, hey, I want to receive, I want to send that Bitcoin. And now let's think about the places where I'm not trusting, right? So now I'm not trusting an exchange. I'm not trusting someone else's Bitcoin node. I'm trusting just my own Bitcoin node. But am I trusting Umbrel and their software? Yes, I am. We're still trying to do minimalized trust, right? But nevertheless, that node that I have has the history of the entire Bitcoin blockchain on it. I can verify that I've actually sent my Bitcoin somewhere around the world to someone else or to an exchange, things like that. And so if let's say there's a nuke and all of America is wiped out, right? All hardware's computers are broken. There is going to be a Bitcoin blockchain somewhere else in the world, right? And it's a sort of redundancy sort of thing, right? That just like it would be very difficult to wipe out every single Bible in existence, there are enough nodes that it would be very difficult to completely wipe out the history of the Bitcoin blockchain. And so we're both minimalizing trust, but we're also adding a layer of security, right? So like I can know that this thing is going to be around for a really long time, that it's not a thing that is, there's only 10 of them. And if one of these 10 go away, that then suddenly, oh no, how do we know what happened or what's going to happen? Because there are so many copies of these nodes all over the world. Now, when you think about how, does this matter for you? If you are new to Bitcoin, do you need to run a node? No, you don't need to run a node to own Bitcoin. Now, I would say to you that it's part of this fun rabbit hole, and I think it's really exciting and really cool to say, hey, I have a copy of the Bitcoin blockchain at my house, and I can verify that all the Bitcoin that I own is there because it's mine, and I can see it through that. But do you need it? No, absolutely not. Again, let's go back again. You can have it just on Coinbase. You have to start there, right? If you don't actually hit buy, then you don't really own anything. But the minimal step you do is take a buy, to exchange dollars for Bitcoin. That's the minimal thing. If we're thinking about steps of increased running down the rabbit hole, increased diving deeper, one of those things would be to take self-custody, to take it onto your own wallet. There's lots of good tutorials on the internet. Maybe we should link some of those. And then sort of the next one I would say is to buy a node. And so there's a few other ones as well. I talked about Umbrel, but David, I know you run something else, right?
Yeah, I have actually run 2 nodes in 2 different locations. I guess I'm a middle child boy, so don't think too highly of me. I'm in this one area of life, maybe an overachiever, but I'm just curious guy and wanted to do it. So yes, I run an Umbrel node in one location, and in another location, I run a node called a Start9 node as well. Both very reputable companies. And back to the security model for all this, whether it be hard wallets or nodes, we want different companies making legitimate, reputable resources for that. Reduces what sometimes is called, the attack vector on these sorts of things. But yes, we run these. It's just fun. It's fun. I'm there by running it. I'm part of copy of the ledger. Back to the bank. The bank, through my app, lets me take a peek at their ledger, right? And I am trusting them not to mess with the ledger. And thus far, my individual bank hasn't. I can tell you the one ledger that is being messed with all the time is the US dollar ledger in terms of the number of dollars there. Nobody's getting out a pencil and erasing the number behind David or Megan Ruffner's name and adding bigger numbers. But there are entities where they get out that pencil and the big eraser all the time on that number 2 Ticonderoga, and they erase it out and they put in a bigger number after it, and they infuse into the system more dollars. And that's disturbing. That's upsetting to me. So I run this node. I'm part of the solution. I'm part of the security model for Bitcoin. That I keep a copy with others anytime a new transaction takes place, or a transaction of Bitcoin that was mined previously. And this would get very technical and well beyond any of our true expertise. But it checks my node along with all these other nodes, and everybody's like, Yeah, Ben can send that Bitcoin because Ben has proven that he has the private keys to it, right? Jared can send that Bitcoin because he's proven he has the private keys to it. And that's what's happening with these variety of nodes spread throughout the world. Back to what you said earlier, Jared, it's not trust list, but it's trust minimized, right? You're spreading the trust out. You're democratizing the trust across the board, and this is it's a fun thing to be a part of. It's a fun thing to be a part of. So back to it, you said you could invest, keep on exchanges. Another step still for your security would be to pull off exchange into your own private wallet, where you've got this private key. And we should really talk about the security of that key, because if you showed us your physical key, and I could say, well, what's keeping me, Jared, from getting a file and a few blanks and just guessing in the dark, and seeing if I can't get a key to open the Townsley's front door and grab the Bitcoin that went through the mail slot there and run, right? We will have to talk about that, I'm sure, on another time. It's a very legitimate question, just a whole conversation about that private and public key. But for now, we know the point of keys is to be secure, right? And we could talk about how secure is it. But yes, you have that key. So you can buy it on exchanges. You can pull it off onto a cold wallet, a hardware wallet, where it's more secure. You're taking further steps. And then a further step of joining the network security and even increasing your security further can be, if you do it right, to run a node. And I'd say to you, we've all done these sorts of things, regrettably at times. Like maybe we used I love Megan as my password on all my stuff until it was found out at one place, and my life got more complicated, admittedly taking greater security protocols. But I'd rather my life be a little bit more complicated and actually have that security than to maybe live in ignorance. So we all do it. We all do it. We wouldn't want all of town to have a key to our house or to our car, right? Or we buy a new home. Ben does. I'm going to guess it. It's going to be a bother. He's either going to pay somebody a good amount of money to rekey the house or figure out how to do it himself. It's going to be a bother, but for the care and love of the people around him, he's willing to do it.
And so I hope that this has been not overwhelming. Let's kind of go full circle here. I'm sure you're overwhelmed, but let's remember where we started, that this is something that takes a long time to learn, that you are truly learning a different way to see, think, talk, engage with the world, if you will, almost. And so you're going to take time, you're going to need to take time to learn these sort of things. So again, we'll leave a term sheet in the link description below here for you to look at some things we haven't even talked about yet, but some of them that we've talked about are there to just refresh yourself. Hey, if this is, what is this word they said? Well, here, this is what we mean when we say that. But stick with it. Don't give up. Keep on going. Like Ben so well said, that we truly think that we're not just here for more money in our bank account, right? We're here to be good stewards of what God is doing. That is the ultimate goal as we do all this sort of stuff.
Thank you, Jared. And thank you, Ben.
Awesome. Great episode. We'll see you next time.